All right, we're going to go to some callers, and then I want to get into this article. The Great Carbon Credit Con. Why are we paying the third world to poison its environment? In the fields around the giant chemicals factory in Gujarat, the barren soil smells of paint stripper, and the water from the well makes you gag. So why has it been given tens of millions of pounds of taxpayer-funded UN green reward points, which are traded hungrily on the financial markets at huge profit? Well, that's why. It's about huge profits and really taking the populace down a notch, expanding that gap between the elites and the slaves. They don't like the middle class. They don't like the upper middle class. They want a huge gap between you and I and the elitists. All right, let's go to David in Minnesota. David, you're on the line.
Hi, Jason.
How you doing?
Hi. I just have, well, I'd like to tell two quick stories, and they'll lead up to a point about 9/11 truth. The first quick story, I'm calling here from Michigan. This is a few years ago. There was a prosecutor for Oakland County, which is Michigan's richest county, named David Gorsica. And this is a high-profile case. He wanted to run for governor, so he wanted a couple of high-profile cases, right? At this time, this was the time of To Catch a Predator and all that. Child molestation was all the rage in the news and everything. So he wanted a couple of child molestation cases. Anyway, it's kind of a rare crime is the point. I mean, it is, child molestation as portrayed in, the media is a kind of a rare crime. Anyway, make a long story short, that him and the police he told all the police and all of his prosecutors, he said, I want a couple of high-profile child molestations. Go get them for me. So ultimately, he chose to prosecute two people completely innocent. The cops and everybody, they just ran roughshod over these people. Fortunately, he messed with the wrong people. One of them was a wealthy Jewish businessman. Another guy had a big social circle. All the charges were dropped, but it was the police and what they were doing to these innocent people was just crazy. So the Michigan Bar Association and the Oakland County, I believe the commissioner's office, they both had investigations, right? Guess what both investigations said? Oh, well, maybe they made a few missteps, but they didn't do anything really wrong. Okay, that's the first story. The second story is Pat Tillman. Now, there were, Pat Tillman, obviously there were 3 bullets put in his forehead from a distance of within 40 yards. Exactly. Well, it could have been 10 yards, could have been 39 yards, but within 40 yards. Now, there were no fewer than 4 military investigations. Actually, the first one says that there was, quote-unquote, criminal intent. But guess what? Every single other investigation always says, oh, maybe they made a few mistakes, but there was no malintent. There was. So I think you might be able to guess the larger point I'm building up to, which is
sure. Same thing with 9/11. For instance, Philip Shannon, one of the 9/11 commissioners, has now written a book which really hasn't gotten a ton of media coverage, where he admits, NORAD lied to us and they made some missteps, and we really don't know the truth on what happened with air traffic control that day, but there was nothing malicious. But I think we should look back into it, and again, they didn't tell the truth. So they'll admit that they didn't tell the truth, but they'll always say, oh, there was no malicious intent.
Exactly. What you're asking to do, the government to do, is basically investigate themselves. It'd be like having O.J. Simpson, investigate the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so when Richard Gage and all these people, and yourself, and all these people who do wonderful work, the objective always, always seems a new independent investigation. And I guess my larger point is, and then I want to make another sub point on this, is that I have, Richard Gage was on your show a few weeks ago. He was talking about how they're going to get New York is going to run their own investigation come this fall or something. I have zero expectation that it will be the exact same thing as the 9/11 Commission report. I mean, they'll probably have Alan Dershowitz running it,
Well, you know what? You're right. But at the same time, a lot of good things did come out of the 9/11 Commission. For instance, I have Richard Myers and Eberhardt on record that drills were going on that morning, that there were false inputs, that they did have other targets. For instance, some of the things that didn't make the actual commission hearings did get into the Team 8 investigations, where they admit, oh, yeah, there were more hijackings than 4, and the 4 hijackings, although they didn't admit hijacking signals, other planes did, and other planes had bombs on board, and they're heavily censored as well, and they also had to cop to the drills. So at the very least, more information, more, fuel for the fire, I guess, will come out, and hopefully researchers like myself will bring it to the forefront until we hit the crescendo, that tipping point. Again, I don't think 9/11 Truth is going to get its due, or the due that it deserves, until the 10th anniversary, and that's only if we're super aggressive on the way up to the 10th anniversary, where we, again, make the media cover us. Unfortunately, our American minds go in 5, 10s, 20s, 25s. We just relate to that more. And, with the run-up to the 7th anniversary, you could see the media cared less and less about 9/11 in general. You saw a couple specials here and there, a couple days before 9/11, then on 9/11, then maybe a retrospect the day after. But on the 5th anniversary, there were shows and specials running up in the months to 9/11, the weeks to 9/11. There was huge coverage on that day. There was huge coverage a week afterwards. So I think that, although you're correct, and I don't believe that an investigation by any kind of New York political or governing body is going to come to the conclusion, hey, this was an inside job. I do believe more facts will surface and people like us will be able to show those facts to others and hopefully, sway someone's opinion, get somebody involved in this. Go ahead.
Well, I guess my larger point was, I guess we're kind of in agreement that any government investigation is going to be watered down at best. But I guess my larger point is, like, let's take Loose Change and Fabled Enemies, the Loose Change Final Cut in particular, actually. It seemed you were very, you had a very clear strategy to never propose theories. It was just all clear-cut data, and I think that was great. Mm-hmm. But I guess if we're not counting on the government, I think rightfully so, to actually come up with, name names and actually come up with an actual, story, an actual, sequence of events, what actually did happen, maybe like in the next iteration of Loose Change, be it by you or whoever else, or the next great 9/11 Truth movie, I would like, names to be named. Obviously, we can name Cheney and Jerome Hauer and some of these other people. There are some people where it's, they're clearly involved, but I guess that's what I would very much like to see is something, with the actual story. I'd like to know what actually did happen. I have zero expectation that we'll ever get prosecutions, but I just want to know exactly who did, and there have obviously been a lot of names. There are lots of people, who, like I just named a pair there, and there's several others who we can say, emphatically were involved, beforehand. Mm-hmm. But that's what I would like. And can I make one other small point somewhat off the subject?
Sure.
Really quickly, sorry. Alex Jones always talks about the fertility rates, being hurt. I just like to say, actually, I don't know if all the men out there in particular should be very mindful of this. And this comes from the Massachusetts Research Institute and a couple of very prominent endocrinology studies. Men's testosterone levels are being systematic, and this is from Newsweek in January, February of 2007. Men's testosterone levels are being systematically eroded at a rate of 1% each year for the past 25 years. That's a very organized downturn. Very obviously, if it were something happening by accident, it would be much more wavy. We could be going up.
It would be sporadic. It would be all over the place. You wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see a sloping incline or decline. I thank you for the call. Yeah. Let's go to Bill in Arkansas. Bill, you're on the line. Yes, Bill.
Hey, buddy. It's Bill in Alaska again.
Oh, sorry. Hey, how you doing, sir?
The Doomsday plane last night.
Yep. I remember. Did you get any more information on that?
Okay, it was there this morning, and I kept my eye on it all day long. I'm not exactly sure when it left, but it did leave. And come to find out, Mr. Gates was in town today. So
so you think it was Mr. Gates' personal plane, huh? Listen, if there's a guy who's in the shadow government and still, a working member of this administration and the past one, it would be Robert Gates. Robert Gates was heavily involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, and that came to light. And that same international intelligence organization is still in power today, my friend. So that is very telling, Bill.
Well, he's been running around rural Alaska taking a look at all the different missile silos and stuff and deciding whether or not to cut the military funding or to increase it or leave it the way it's going. So that's what I'm gathering that he's up here doing. It's always comforting to know that you and I are spending the money on that fuel for him to peruse around and things like that.
Yeah, I know. If it was like $325,000 for a quote-unquote photo op in New York City, you got to wonder what it costs to bring Gates around on an E-4B.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's going to be sickening. And, what's even worse is the guys that I work with there, I'm like, dude, there's a doomsday plane sitting at the end of the runway. It's not a doomsday plane. I'm like, look, right here. Looked it up. Doomsday plane. What comes up? E-4B sitting there. So you see the thing on the top? That's a doomsday plane. It's not a doomsday plane. One of the pictures that came up was, I think I remember seeing it in this cool film named Fabled Enemies. It was definitely the shot over the White House there. But it's pretty sad. Even the people that I work with don't believe it's a doomsday plane.
Even the people in the military don't know the lingo for the E-4B, even though they admit that's what it's for. It's for mass Armageddon exercises, and I mean that's the real deal. I thank you for the call, Bill. We're going to go to Connor, Jory, Patrick, and more. On the other side, I want to read some of this article. The farmers faced wizened and browned from hours in the harsh Guajarta sun Lower a bucket into a well. It's a solid brick cylinder 100 feet deep. The sun is high in the sky, beating down on the scorched earth. In the baked fields, maize and cotton have been planted, but none of the crops look very healthy. Leaves are wilted and tinged brown. Nothing has been watered for months.